Well, 16,000 frontline security personnel are being denied pay increases due to lack of government action amidst this cost of living crisis. Minister English, Damien English, last August said he was going to go ahead and implement the employment regulation order from the Labour Court in respect of pay for security personnel. He hasn't done it, and the Irish Security Industry Association are now calling for action on this by the Minister, and they say he urgently needs to do it. Sarah O'Donnell is here with us from the Irish Security Industry Association. Sarah, you are a representative of the employers, of some of the employers in this industry, calling for the Minister to enact the employment regulation order.
Yes, that's right, David. Thank you for having me on this morning. Our members represent employers in the private security industry across all sectors of the industry, but it's our guarding service members that are particularly concerned about this matter. The last time that the security guarding sector received a pay increase was in 2019, and that was the last increase of the previous employment regulation order that came into effect in 2017. And that then expired in 2020. We should have seen a new employment regulation order come into effect. But it has been held up.
Okay, and Sarah, when you say you're guarding members, these are the security guards you would see on maybe building sites, industrial estates, shopping centres, the front line of security industry.
Absolutely, David. You see them everywhere, and there are, they're protecting services where we don't even see them every day. They are in our shopping centres. They're sometimes at reception in a commercial site when you walk into an office building. They're patrolling buildings across the country, up and down the length and breadth of the country. They're in our university campuses. They're in our hospitals. And they are the people who worked tirelessly when many of us were huddled and working at home during the COVID-19 pandemic and keeping ourselves safe. They were out there every day, 24/7, ensuring our safety and security.
They were. Now, I think we probably need to explain to listeners what exactly the employment regulation order is. And my understanding of it is that the major stakeholders in the security industry that would be representative of the workers and the employers in the industry come together under the auspices of the Labour Court and decide the pay and terms and conditions for the industry, and then it applies by law to all providers in that industry. Isn't that the case?
That's correct. It's a wonderful mechanism that we have. It allows representatives of both employers and employees to come together and negotiate terms and conditions that are better and appropriate to the line of work that the employees are completing. So in the case of security, it's looking at the work that they do and the services they provide and negotiating pay and terms and conditions that are appropriate to that industry, that are slightly above the minimum rates of pay. And in the case of the Security Joint Labour Committee, the representatives of both the employers and the employees worked together to negotiate those terms and conditions and agreed those terms and conditions. The employment regulation order was submitted to the Labour Court, and as you rightly point out, Minister English had signalled his intention to sign that employment regulation order on two separate occasions. So the last occasion was in August of this year, and at the end of August, the employees of the private security industry should have seen their pay increase. And unfortunately, that did not occurred due to a High Court injunction preventing the minister from signing the order. And that is the second time that has happened.
And this issue, employment regulations or orders worked for many, many years without interruption. And then they were struck down and this new version of them was put in place. But now we have a further challenge to the idea that you can set a legal minimum for a particular industry where the major players in that industry agree is the appropriate rate. So what effectively has happened here is that 3 companies don't want to pay the recognised fair rate of pay, so they've gone to the High Court and stopped the implementation. Is that it?
Yes, well, I don't know their reasons for doing it, but yes, it is 3 companies that are preventing that have gone to the High Court and that are preventing this employment regulation order from being signed, which is shocking. You know, we're facing a cost of living crisis in this country, as you and all of your listeners will well know. Not only that, the security industry, quite like many other industries, is facing recruitment and resourcing challenges. It's hard to attract staff at the moment. There's a lot of competition between sectors. And this certainly is not helping our members to attract staff.
Well, it isn't, but when you say the minister was injuncted, then the minister has a problem, does he? Does he have to go to court now to get that injunction lifted?
Well, it's interesting. It has been brought to our attention by the Taoiseach's office that liberty had been granted to the minister to make an application to have the injunction lifted. And we were notified of that in September. And we thought, fantastic, perhaps this employment regulation order will be signed. Perhaps the injunction will be lifted. And the men and women of the private security industry will get the pay increase that they rightly deserve. And we wrote to the Taoiseach's office, and we wrote to the Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar at the time, and asked, has an application been made to have the injunction lifted? If an application has been made, when do you expect to receive notification of the application? And if an application has not been made, when will you make an application? We've written several times about this matter to the Taoiseach's office and to other government representatives. As it stands, we have been notified that no application has been made, that the government is waiting on advice from council, and that department officials are liaising with them on the matter, but they have not been given the advice to, at this point, make an application. And we're asking them to get the advice that they require and to make that application to have this injunction lifted.
Well, given the number of people who are being deprived of an increase that, as you say, is agreed with their employer, it is extraordinary that there would be foot dragging on this. We now have you mentioned him, Leo is now the Taoiseach, and I've no doubt that Leo's advisors listening to his local radio station, and he will be advised of what we're saying here. So what should we be saying directly to the Taoiseach to get Damien English to do what you require him to do?
Well, at this point, it may be, I don't know if it's Damien English or if it's Simon Coveney, Minister Coveney at this point, that would need to take charge of this matter. But we need them to get council to give them the advice that they require so that they can make an application to the court to have the injunction lifted. Until that injunction is lifted, there are many sectors that just simply will not implement the pay increase, and that is extremely true of the public sector. The Office of Government Procurement will not grant any pay increases until there is a legislative requirement to do so. So you can imagine all of the public services that are supported by security staff the staff in those settings are not, under any circumstances, receiving that increase until there is a legislative requirement. So, the hospitals or government buildings, all the security that work in those sites, they won't get that pay increase until the injunction is lifted and there's a legislative requirement. So we're asking the government to get the injunction lifted. And if that's taking too long, well, could you get the Office of Government Procurement to grant the pay increases, as many in the private sector have done, because they recognise the importance of security and the risks that the security staff manage.
Well, that's a very important point you're making, that, a state mechanism which has worked, and, except for the challenges in recent years, there was an electrical contractors challenge to it previously, but except for those, it had worked for many, many years very successfully in establishing a rate for a particular sector of employment in a particular industry, and there were no arguments. It then meant that there was fair competition in the industry, where it meant that government departments would recognise that and pay the provider the appropriate amount so that they could pay their staff, and all of that is stopped by a High Court injunction. It sounds extraordinary that the government, who sponsored this system and it has worked for them, can't implement it in their own sector.
That's right, David. I mean, it really is extraordinary. And to think, again, that these are the people who manage risk in both public settings and private settings up and down the country. We don't see them necessarily, because you only notice security when you need them. But they are there. They're managing risk. They're ensuring our safety. They're ensuring our security all across the country. And to think that, as you rightly point out, the employers and the employees have come together and said, we want them to have better pay, better terms and conditions. It's been agreed. And it's 3 companies holding it up, and the lack of action by the government to make an application and have the injunction lifted.
Sarah, it's been a pleasure talking to you. It's an extraordinarily complex set of circumstances that have risen on a very simple issue, which is giving fair pay to those people, as you say, who are doing such worthwhile work in our communities, protecting premises, protecting us when we go into shopping centres and everywhere else, and their employers and their employee representatives have agreed the rate, but it's been held up. Thank you for explaining all of that to people, and very happy Christmas to you, Sarah.
Thank you, David, and many happy returns.
Thank you.